अखण्डमण्डलाकारं व्याप्तं येन चराचरं तत्पदं दर्शितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। हरि ओम्। ॐ तव कथामृतं तप्तजीवनं कविभिरीडितं कल्मषापहं श्रवणमङ्गलं श्रीमदाततं भुवि गृह्णन्ति ये भूरिदा जनाः। The Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, Chapter 3, page 99. Visit to Vidyasagar. August 5th, 1882. Pandit Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar was born in the village of Bir Singh, not far from Kamarpukur, Sri Ramakrishna's birthplace. He was known as a great scholar, educator, writer, and philanthropist. One of the creators of modern Bengali, he was also well versed in Sanskrit grammar and poetry. His generosity made his name a household word with his countrymen, most of his income being given in charity to widows, orphans, indigent students, and other needy people. Nor was his compassion limited to human beings. He stopped drinking milk for years so that the cows should not be deprived of it. And he would not drive in a carriage for fear of causing discomfort to the horses. He was a man of indomitable spirit, which he showed when he gave the lucrative position of principal of the Sanskrit College of Calcutta because of a disagreement with the authorities. His affection for his mother was especially deep. One day, in the absence of a ferry boat, he swam a raging river at the risk of his life to fulfill her wish that he should be present at his brother's wedding. His whole life was one of utter simplicity. The title Vidyasagar, meaning ocean of learning, was given to him in recognition of his vast erudition. Sri Ramakrishna had long wanted to visit Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar. Learning from him that he was a teacher at Vidyasagar's school, the master asked, "Can you take me to Vidyasagar? I should like very much to see him." Yam told Ishwar Chandra of Sri Ramakrishna's wish, and the Pandit gladly agreed that Yam should bring the master some Saturday afternoon at 4 o'clock. He also asked Yam what kind of Paramahansa the master was, saying, "Does he wear an ochre cloth?" Yam answered, "No, sir. He is an unusual person. He wears a red-bordered cloth and polished slippers. He lives in a room in Rani Rasmani's temple garden. In his room, there is a couch with a mattress and mosquito net. He has no outer indication of holiness, but he doesn't know anything except God. Day and night, he thinks of God alone." On the afternoon of August 5th, the master left Dakshineswar in a hackney carriage, accompanied by Bhavanath, Yam, and Hazrat. Vidyasagar lived in Badur Bagan in central Calcutta, about 6 miles from Dakshineswar. On the way, Sri Ramakrishna talked with his companions, but as the carriage neared Vidyasagar's house, his mood suddenly changed. He was overpowered with divine ecstasy. Not noticing this, Yam pointed out the garden house where Raja Rammohan Roy had lived. The master was annoyed and said, "I don't care about such things now." He was going into an ecstatic state. The carriage stopped in front of Vidyasagar's house. The master alighted, supported by Yam, who then led the way. In the courtyard were many flowering plants. As the master walked to the house, he said to Yam, like a child, pointing to his shirt button, "My shirt is unbuttoned. Will that offend Vidyasagar?" "Oh no," said Yam. "Don't be anxious about it. Nothing about you will be offensive. You don't have to button your shirt. He accepted the assurance simply like a child. Vidyasagar was about 62 years old, 16 or 17 years older than the master. He lived in a two-story house built in the English fashion with lawns on all sides and surrounded by a high wall. After climbing the stairs to the second floor, Sri Ramakrishna and his devotees entered a room at the far end of which Vidyasagar was seated facing them with a table in front of him. To the right of the table was a bench. Some friends of their host occupied chairs on the other two sides. Vidyasagar rose to receive the master. Sri Ramakrishna stood in front of the bench with one hand resting on the table. He gazed at Vidyasagar as if they had known each other before and smiled in an ecstatic mood. In that mood, he remained standing a few minutes. Now and then, to bring his mind back to normal consciousness, he said, "I shall have a drink of water." In the meantime, the young members of the household and a few friends and relatives of Vidyasagar had gathered around. Sri Ramakrishna, still in an ecstatic mood, sat on the bench. A young man, 17 or 18 years old, who had come to Vidyasagar to seek financial help for his education, was seated there. The master sat down at a little distance from the boy, saying in an abstracted mood, "Mother, this boy is very much attached to the world. He belongs to thy realm of ignorance." Vidyasagar told someone to bring water and asked Yam whether the master would like some sweetmeats also. Since Yam did not object, Vidyasagar himself went eagerly to the inner apartments and brought the sweets. They were placed before the master. Bhavanath and Hazra also received their share. When they offered to Yam, Vidyasagar said, "Oh, he is like one of the family. We needn't worry about him." Referring to a young devotee, the master said to Vidyasagar, "He is a nice young man and is sound at the core. He is like the river Falgu. The surface is covered with sand, but if you dig a little, you will find water flowing underneath." After taking some of the sweets, the master with a smile began to speak to Vidyasagar. Meanwhile, the room had become filled with people. Some were standing and others were seated. "Master, today at last I have come to the ocean. Up till now I have seen only canals, marshes or a river at the most. But today I am face to face with the sagar, the ocean." All laugh. Vidyasagar smiling. "Then please take home some salt water." Laughter. "Master, oh no, why salt water? You aren't the ocean of ignorance. You are the ocean of vidya, knowledge. You are the ocean of condensed milk." All laugh. Vidyasagar, "Well, you may put it that way." The Pandit became silent. Sri Ramakrishna said, "Your activities are inspired by sattva. Though they are rajasic, they are influenced by sattva. Compassion springs from sattva. Though work for the good of others belongs to rajas, yet this rajas has sattva for its basis and is not harmful. Sukha and other sages cherished compassion in their minds to give people religious instruction, to teach them about God. You are distributing food and learning. That is good too. If these activities are done in a selfless spirit, they lead to God. But most people work for fame or to acquire merit. Their activities are not selfless. Besides, you are already a siddha." There is a note. Literally, siddha means perfect or boiled. The word is applied both to the perfected soul and to boiled things. Vidyasagar, "How is it that, sir?" Master, laughing, "When potatoes and other vegetables are well cooked, they become soft and tender. And you possess such a tender nature. You are so compassionate." Laughter. Vidyasagar laughing, "But When the paste of kalai pulse is boiled, it becomes all the harder. Master, but you don't belong to that class. Mere pandits are like diseased fruit that becomes hard and will not ripen at all. Such fruit has neither the freshness of green fruit nor the flavor of ripe. Vultures soar very high in the sky, but their eyes are fixed on rotten carrion on the ground. The book learned and the reputed are reputed to be wise, but they are attached to woman and gold. Like the vultures, they are in search of carrion. They are attached to the world of ignorance. Compassion, love of God, and renunciation are the glories of true knowledge. Vidyasagar listened to these words in silence. The others too gazed at the master and were attentive to every word he said. Vidyasagar was very reticent about giving religious instruction to others. He had studied Hindu philosophy. Once, when M had asked him his opinion of it, Vidyasagar had said, "I think the philosophers have failed to explain what was in their minds." But in his daily life, he followed all the rituals of Hindu religion and wore the sacred thread of a Brahmin. About God, he had once declared, "It is indeed impossible to know Him. What then should be our duty? It seems to me that we should live in such a way that if others followed our example, this very earth would be heaven. Everyone should try to do good to the world." Sri Ramakrishna's conversation now turned to the knowledge of Brahman. Master, Brahman is beyond Vidya and Avidya, knowledge and ignorance. It is beyond Maya, the illusion of duality. The world consists of the illusory duality of knowledge and ignorance. It contains knowledge and devotion and also attachment to woman and gold, righteousness and unrighteousness, good and evil. But Brahman is unattached to these. Good and evil apply to the jiva, the individual soul. Do righteousness and unrighteousness, but Brahman is not at all affected by them. One may read the Bhagavata by the light of a lamp, and another may commit a forgery by that very light, but the lamp is unaffected. The sun sheds its light on the wicked as well as on the virtuous. You may ask, how then can one explain misery and sin and unhappiness? The answer is that these apply only to the jiva. Brahman is unaffected by them. There is poison in a snake, but though others may die if bitten by it, the snake itself is not affected by the poison. What Brahman is cannot be described. All things in the world, the Vedas, the Puranas, the Tantras, the 6 systems of philosophy have been defiled, like food that has been touched by the tongue, for they have been read or uttered by the tongue. Only one thing has not been defiled in this way, and that is Brahman. No one has ever been able to say what Brahman is. Vidyasagar to his friends, "Oh, that is a remarkable statement. I have learned something new today." Master, a man had 2 sons. The father sent them to a preceptor to learn the knowledge of Brahman. After a few years, they returned from their preceptor's house and bowed low before their father. Wanting to measure the depth of their knowledge of Brahman, he first questioned the older of the 2 boys. "My child," he said, "you have studied all the scriptures. Now tell me, what is the nature of Brahman?" The boy began to explain Brahman by reciting various texts from the Vedas. The father did not say anything. Then he asked the younger son the same question. But the boy remained silent and stood with eyes cast down. No word escaped his lips. The father was pleased and said to him, "My child, you have understood a little of Brahman. What it is cannot be expressed in words. Men often think they have understood Brahman fully. Once an ant went to a hill of sugar One grain filled its stomach. Taking another grain in its mouth, it started homeward. On its way it thought, next time I shall carry home the whole hill. That is the way shallow minds think. They don't know that Brahman is beyond one's words and thought. However great a man may be, how much can he know of Brahman? Sukadeva and sages like him may have been big ants, but even they could carry at the most 8 or 10 grains of sugar. As for what has been said in the Vedas and the Puranas, do you know what it is like? Suppose a man has seen the ocean and somebody asks him, well, what is the ocean like? The first man opens his mouth as wide as he can and says, what a sight, what tremendous waves and sounds. The description of Brahman in the sacred books is like that. It is said in the Vedas that Brahman is of the nature of bliss. It is Satchidananda. Sukha and other sages stood on the shore of this ocean of Brahman and saw and touched the water. According to one school of thought, they never plunged into it. Those who do cannot come back to the world again. In Samadhi, one attains the knowledge of Brahman. One realizes Brahman. In that state, reasoning stops altogether and man becomes mute. He has no power to describe the nature of Brahmans. Once a salt doll went to measure the depth of the ocean. All laughed. It wanted to tell others how deep the water was, but this it could never do, for no sooner did it get into the water than it melted. Now, who was that to report the ocean's depth? So welcome to the 8th week of our Gospel of Ramakrishna class. We are having readings and reflections. So today we went into the chapter 3